judge my taste. Okay, I'm going to read now. I remember going to see Kiss on the 15th of May, 1976, at the Hammersmith Odeon. It was the first time they had played in England. I wore black lipstick and mother's platform boots. Then I bunked off school and went to welcome the band. The only way to atone for being a little overdressed is by being always absolutely undereducated. It is so moving to see someone doing exactly what they should be doing. Paul Stanley, with his heart-shaped face and eyes like teardrop diamonds, served the teenage world up their dreams with a masterful grace. There was a time when an audience thought that they were lucky to be at a concert, and they were lucky that you would play for them. We are lucky that you are here, and we have to work hard to make you stay, he said from the stage. With Kiss and the Dolls, meaning the New York Dolls, I had found simultaneously the most real and artificial bands in the world. I was happy. I've always liked trash, and unhip trash too. I know you're supposed to like all those blacks singing the blues or those blues singing the blacks, but I'm afraid I don't. Bands like the Rolling Stones are the worst. The whites singing the blacks. Nice middle-class boys pretending to be Negroes is just so silly. I like Mark Bolan, Kiss, and the Sex Pistols and Guns N' Roses. The whites singing the whites. All the games I played with Steve were really one game. We dressed up in mother's clothes, clapped on as much makeup as the forces of gravity would allow, and staggered into the streets of Beverly. Hours had been spent painting each other's eyeshadow, lipstick, and rouge. Then we stood outside photographing each other in the faces of astonished bystanders. Homosexual tendencies are in some degree common to all creative personalities. It later turned out that my little friend was in fact homosexual and could have influenced me. I wasn't a faggot, but I was willing to learn. Being an instinctive pessimist, however, I confidently expected all human affairs to go seriously wrong at some point. I wasn't disappointed. Stepfather decided that our relationship was unhealthy and antisocial. Remarks were made about our sexuality. Steve was banished forever from the home. All this did was inflame our love. There was always a charm about the forbidden that makes it unspeakably desirable. I spent my days in a silent rage, throwing darts dipped in red-painted photographs of stepfather. As all teenagers know, impotent hatred is the most horrible of all emotions. One should hate nobody whom one cannot destroy. Maybe it was wrong to discriminate based on this incident when there were so many other reasons to dislike him. One day, however, stepfather did something that was utterly unforgivable. He saved my life. Summer had set in with its usual severity, and I was busy sitting around watching the hours pass when I was asked to cut the lawn. Like many people who have nothing to do, I was resentful of any claims on my time, especially when it came to the garden. Nothing would induce me to till or even scratch the soil, apart from a promise of money. Even trying to start the lawnmower took more time and energy than if I'd cut the entire lawn with my teeth. But eventually, I managed to drag the damn thing out of slumber. It waltzed off, with me in tow, up and down the lawn. Look at me, I thought. Gardening. No hope for the future. After about 10 minutes, I'd had enough of topiary and was just about ready to throw in the towel when I cut through the cable of the electric lawnmower. Shit. I cut the engine and set about trying to repair the lead. Nicking the plastic covering of the severed wires, I put them in my mouth and stripped it back. Then, rejoining the two ends, I got some scissors to trim the untidy bits off. I screamed. At first I thought someone had kicked me in the back. I lurched forward, my body jerking in spasms, my mind an explosion of glittering, fizzing, and popping stars. I didn't see my life flash in front of me, perhaps because I hadn't actually done anything. But I was flung, convulsing, onto the ground. Unable to scissors which had hooked up with me in the main current. My screams were heard from the house. They were probably heard from heaven. Mother walked into the garden and just joined in, bawling and caterwauling. But stepfather knew right away what to do. He ran to the mains and turned the power off. He had been due to go out, but it canceled at the last minute. I lay there, stunned. The stench of burning flesh filled my nostrils. The hot metal of the scissors had burnt me to the bone. I hadn't died for long, but it was enough for me. I had been to the other side, and if this was dying, I didn't think much of it. For the amount of publicity it got, it was a bit of an anticlimax. At the hospital, the doctor told me that only a strong heart had saved me. If the wires had joined in my mouth, then the final curtain would have closed. I still wonder if anyone would have clapped. When I returned to school, I was plunged into another drama. In the holidays, my love affair with Raji had blossomed. I had written her pornographic letters which her parents had intercepted and taken to the headmaster. My expulsion was demanded. I was thrilled. This would heighten my princely stature and confirm gallantry. But instead we were split up and now spent all our lessons apart. At least I was getting attention. Everything about my first love was dramatic and painful. Raji plunged me into the cold, toxic bath of jealousy from which I never really fully recovered. A faithful woman is someone who is responsible. She doesn't want two men to suffer at the same time. Raji would have found two men suffering irresponsible when she could have had four. I can still remember their names. Boris, Flynn, Andrew, and I can still remember the gut-twisting agony of watching her walking hand in hand with Flynn down to the games field, or peering through the sixth form study window as she bobbed up and down affectionately on Andrew's knee. Outside was unforgiving, wintry, and dark, but inside his blonde hair glowed warm beige and orange light as they snuggled and giggled. Love may be blind, but jealousy sees too much. You're the one I really love, Sebastian, she said as I caressed her with all the warmth and hurt of my desires. We were lying at the back of the gym, wrapped around each other, and I imagined the other boys touching her dark skin and felt my body wincing and aching with pain. Except that they weren't boys to me. They were men. Boris was 16 when Raji had lost her virginity to him. We fumbled around in foreplay, and for years I sniffled and scrabbled around for the leftovers thrown down from the big boys' table. But in the end, we were all the same. Raji played with us like flies in a bottle, pulling our wings off one by one. He loves me. He loves me not. He loves me. He loves me not. I was faithful to her. Ash had now moved from her school to mine and would scoop me up in her arms as I wailed at the latest betrayal. If all life ends in weeping, then all love begins in it. At least mine did. When you are older, being hurt gives you a pleasant, mournful glow, and I often luxuriate in feeling wounded. But as a boy, I did not. Mr. Auden tells us that the affairs of the heart are as crooked as a corkscrew. Maybe he would agree that my first romantic experience would have been straight. Jealousy is usually a symptom of neurotic insecurity. In my case, perhaps my neurotic insecurity was inspired by this dreadful jealousy. 2 months was the longest stretch I did of not talking to Raji, standing in the food queue, laughing ostentatiously as I monitored obsessively out of the corner of my eye, running around the physics room with other girls jumping and playing as I saw her approaching in the distance. The days stretched out eternally, and suffering, time is made visible. I had so much time on my hands and so little to fill it. By now I had been relieved of all sporting duty on the grounds that I wasn't suited. This was a victory. I detested sport with the same passion that I loved music. As a young man preparing my lifestyle, I avoided playing even the mildest games, because they did not constitute part of that style. For one thing, I knew I would not win, and for another, I knew that the competition of any kind encourages a man to which is a completely misguided activity. In sport, I only had the rugged will to lose. In football, I won one game in a row. My theory is that if you buy an ice cream cone and make it hit your mouth, you can play football or tennis. If you stick it on your forehead, your chances are less. I was worse at cricket. I've never been able to catch and couldn't hit a cow's back with a banjo, let alone the ball. I was put on the boundary and encouraged to look upon the game for what it was, organized daydreaming. But it was rugby that I reserved the bulk of my loathing for. The idea of the game was to run head first into the other players. The ball seemed incidental. If, however, you happened to get this ball, everyone would hit you. For me, therefore, the object of the match was that, the moment the whistle left the referee's frostbitten lips, I should get as far away from it as possible. On those better afternoons, I would fling myself upon the field and run madly off in all directions. It was not only in sport that I failed to excel. Academically, I was more than brilliant. I was mediocre. The problems I was having at this time were exacerbated by the first signs of a nervous disorder that only later I would identify as obsessive-compulsive disorder. I was always worried as a child, and if worry is interest paid on trouble before it falls due, then I developed rituals to repay the debt once and for all. It began with touching, counting, feeling underneath the surfaces, always multiples of 6 and 36 times. When I found out about lucky numbers, Mother was 36. Leaving rooms became problematic for me, and reading and writing, never easy, were now hindered by endless compulsive rituals. All my work had to be underlined twice in red ink, and I would remember a passage, line, or word in a book, and spend days trying to find it, not resting until I had. I would ask myself a question: will Raji leave me? Or will I pass this exam? And then open a book at random. Seeing an E first meant yes, and an O, no. Seeing on was no reversed, and so yes, and so on and on. The ritual could be repeated anything from 6 to 36 times. It was exhausting. There was now a right way to do everything, and if it was done wrong, something would go awry. I once heard a story of a train passenger who spent an entire journey from London to Bristol, tearing his newspaper into small pieces, which he would then throw out of the window. "Why do you keep doing that?" asked a bemused fellow passenger. "Because it keeps the tigers away," came the reply. "But there are no tigers." Wonderfully effective, isn't it? That's OCD.